Thank you, Jan. It's a great pleasure to be here. When Professor Stephen Hawking died recently, his family remembered that this extraordinary man of science often said, "It wouldn't be much of a universe if it wasn't home to the people you love." In a world full of beauty and wonder, love and relationships are indeed the great miracle. They are what give our life meaning. Today, my wonderful son Sean and I are going to talk about how we have taken seriously that message, love is the answer, and invested our time and energy to build a rich and included life for Sean. Not a perfect fairy tale life, but a great life all the same. We've been asked to talk about relationships through the years, but I do not have the 5-step plan to making friends. Instead, I share with humility what I think of as our experiments with the art of building relationships. But we will reassure you that even though there are times of heartache, choosing an included life is worth it, and that the grass is always greener where you water it. Sean has been a bit of a reluctant presenter. He's a massive extrovert, but he's been nervous about this and not so convinced it was a good idea. But this is his life. You can leave that. And I'm delighted and so very proud that he's been able to be here today.
You stay here.
I'm staying here.
Yeah.
Move closer. Big voice.
My name is Sean. I'm 23. I live in South Perth. Living with my dad, too.
And who else?
With that too. My daughter is named Pirate. I just got married, 25, and living in London. My first technique is to get at home. He sometimes annoys me.
What does he do to annoy you?
In the room.
He puts too many, what does he put on his bedroom floor?
Too many towels.
Too many towels.
I don't think. Hard door into at night. To like my friend said, like and formal. I work like the road on my own and Thursday. I work 3 weeks on Wednesday. I work Saturday on Tuesday and Friday.
Who do you work with here? Who's that?
Edo and Robert.
Yep.
Had fun with my workfriend. I like to beer with my old man on stool. I do lots of things with my little friend. Had to bring from class 1. And a lot of people who like me. I like it shopping and cooking. I started me up in 2019. Can't wait.
Can't wait. What's going to be the best part of living in your own place?
Quite right here.
25 years living at home. 23?
That's right.
Yep.
23.
I think you can't wait to have your own rules.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you. Okay, sir.
Thanks, Legend. My call.
Okay, you can go and help. So what we're going to do now is show you, hear from some of Sean's friends about what they appreciate about Sean.
Yeah, Sean's brings lots of energy and is always up for a joke. I really like that because I like a good sense of humour. also helpful, knows when he's got a job, is really helpful at it, so he's helping me keep time at youth group once. That was really good. I like running a game and it's going overtime. Sean says we've got to move on. What's that?
Yeah, you're gonna beat me.
I'm gonna beat you.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Sean's really good at starting off frisbee. You know, like in frisbee we send like 2 teams, and then usually I think traditionally in the game the person throws it from this side, but Sean instead has the frisbee and does like a whole run of the field and then throws it at the last second, and it's great. I would say he really loved being an adult. Like, he really likes all the roles that are in it and being independent and helping out. Something I really like is like whenever it's one of our birthdays, or one of my birthdays because it was recently, he's always like, "Oh, you're lucky, Laura," and I was like, "I guess I am lucky. Yeah, that's really nice." And he'd give us like, buy us cakes and bring ice cream or cards or flowers.
Oh, what flowers? Birthday? Yeah.
Genius.
Just on the birthday thing, Sean makes it birthday week out of these events. Like, he'll let everyone know every time he sees me. It's Callan's birthday on Monday. It's Callan's birthday on Monday.
Sean, I think we've been working together for 18 months. We always go to lunch together.
Yeah.
But mostly we catch up when we go out for lunch.
Yeah.
We'd usually go out and grab a burger, or sometimes we go and grab a hot dog. Yeah.
Okay, chicken, chip, and burger, and chip.
Yeah, we're creatures of habit. Yeah, Sean and I do meet up outside of work. You came over to my place for my birthday barbecue.
Yeah.
We had a few beers and kicked around the backyard. And I'm going to be having a housewarming because I'm moving house soon.
Yeah.
And you're going to come up to that?
Don't cut my beer.
Hey,
I'll take you
I make no promises. Okay.
Yeah, we've known him over 16 years. Yeah, we met him in grade 1, so 2002, and over 16 years now.
What brought our class together closer than some other classes was having Sean in the classroom, the way he would host birthday parties where everyone in the grade was invited, so no one wanted to miss out on Sean's awesome birthday party either.
It was in January when some people would be away and you'd make sure you were home for Sean's party. Like, one of the big things with us was we have a shared love of swimming. Like, me, Rachel and Shawnee love swimming, and so we always used to swim together. At the end of high school and through the first couple of years when we started uni and Sean was working, swimming was a really important way that we were able to hang out with him. I loved going swimming when Sean was there because it was so much more fun.
Yeah.
He was hilarious. He'd
show off.
Yeah, he'd always show off to us. I love the way he pushed us in our swimming, and it also kind of made our friendship with him a lot stronger.
One of the milestones that I felt in our relationship was having Sean teach me how to do something. It was like, he'd taught us little things like implicitly throughout our schooling about inclusiveness and that, and being happy and finding the positives, that sort of thing. But when he was able to explicitly sit down and show me how to do something on my phone that I actually didn't know how to do was really amazing. For him to be like, so this is how you do it, press this button, do this, and look at this. It really blew me away. I think it was once he started working, he just grew so much. He was so much clearer in his speech. He had a bank card and he was going and buying stuff at the shops. Like, we were going out for drinks. Like, he had this growth that we weren't really expecting, and
it was really fun having Shawnee there for university, even though it was only a semester and 1 subject. Kind of having him part of what we consider to be our normal day-to-day life was really fun. We hadn't had that since primary school, where he was part of our daily routine. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was just nice to have that in common as well with him, that we were all at uni together. We could talk about what subjects we were doing. He showed us his notebook of all his notes and his computer, and
it was definitely a very positive thing for all of us, seeing how proud he was to have a textbook just like we did. We didn't really think about it as much in primary school, but it was just kind of accepted that that was the way. We were all friends. There was no... I think that's a hard thing to explain, is like there was no conscious decision. When you're 4 years old, you don't think, oh, I'm going to hang out with this special needs kid because I pity him, or I want him to feel included. It was, there's Sean, he's a friend, I'm going to play with him.
Yeah, he'll make me laugh.
Yeah.
And that's, to this day, that's one of the reasons we connect so often is just I can depend on Sean to make me happy.
Yeah.
Like I know that I'll walk away happier after seeing Sean than before I saw him.
You can go down that. Thank you. So there's lots, the interview with his school friends was quite instructive for their reflections on the school experience, and I'd be really interested to talk to people afterwards about that, because I know that school can be such a struggle, but they just saw it as such an asset to have Sean in their class. So Sean's life is very different from what I first imagined in the dismal hours and weeks after his birth, when I thought that a diagnosis of Down syndrome was condemning him and our family to a life of isolation. I was haunted by dreaded images of an adult son, and we were housebound and lonely. If only I had a glimpse of the life Sean leads now. As Sean and his friends have already described, he's a valued worker, a youth group leader, a student, a friend, a swimmer, a volunteer, he's a cyclist, a boxer, a gym member. He's studied hospitality at TAFE and been a student at the University of Queensland. He's the MDA barbecue master, and he's a world traveller. His life is also very rich in relationships, and I want to spend some time, I guess, talking about the different circles that he has. So he was born into a family that loves and cherishes him. He is still in touch with many of his primary school friends, not just Harriet and Rachel. So this photo from the year before last, he had 15 or 16 of his primary school friends at his 21st, which I don't think is bad 7 years after primary school finished and out of a class of 26. He sees these kids very, very regularly, even though some are now kind of living interstate. They'll always catch up when they're back. He has lots and lots of high school friends that, as he said in his presentation, he likes to have a beer with. This is his old boys from school, and again, he had 40 of his high school friends at his 21st, and I do love that the police were called at 9 p.m, just like any other 21st should be. And he has his youth group friends, and I'll talk a little bit about the roles that he holds with the youth group and with Frisbee, which isn't exactly an activity of youth group, but lots of overlap in that group. As it's explained, he's been working now for 4.5 years since he left school at an organisation called Multicultural Development Australia. I do want to make special mention of the woman like this, who is actually the CEO of that organisation, who is also my very good friend and who carved out a role for Sean and also created a culture within that organisation of welcome, fun and celebration. Some more of his work colleagues. He has a new job at the Brisbane Convention Centre. That's what he talks about as South Bank. He's been there for 12 months in 2 teams, in the uniform room and in the sets department, doing, I guess, the staging and room setup there. He has lots and lots of connections with the friends through Millie, his older sister. And when I hear people say, well, don't burden the siblings, I think this is a balance, but I don't think that Sean is a burden, obviously, and it's ordinary for siblings to have both separateness and overlapping friendship groups. This wasn't something I consciously cultivated, but Sean was always very much included by Millie's friends, and that has opened up so many opportunities for him. University balls, 21st dinners, housewarmings, going away, clubbing. There's a photo later of him, kind of when we were overseas and we caught up with the girls in Cambodia. Just amazing experiences. And one of the photos Sean showed in his presentation was actually lots of Millie's friends who were at his 18th birthday, even though she wasn't because she was overseas. There are his lawyer friends, some of whom have known him his whole life through his dad, and others who he's only met when he's done casual work in his dad's office or hung out for Friday lunch or after work drinks. There are his boxing friends. Most of these are actually lawyers, except for the guy with the band-aids who actually is a world champion boxer. And then there's a small number of friends with disability, most of whom he's known his whole life because I connected with their parents, so Jack and Freya and Emma and Caitlin. There are friends through my work at Crew and through my previous work at an organisation called QSID. And there's ex-support workers who are still very involved in Sean's life and who he'll go out to gigs with or to festivals for dinners and lunches, etc. Living an included life and aiming high also means you get to party with the Deputy Premier of Queensland, who's the woman in the grey between Sean and the other woman in red, who's the cousin of one of his work supervisors, with literary legends and random ministers, and even with the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at UQ. He has neighbours and family friends, support circle members, people in our local community, his annual camping friends, his gym friends. Now, not all of these, of course, have the same significance, but it adds up to a life rich in relationship and further possibility. So how did we get there from a place of imagining only isolation and loneliness? We were lucky to meet people who showed us the power of following a dream with focus and intention. Al Mansky says there are 3 challenges for families: opening, asking, believing. And I believe of these 3, believing is the most critical, putting aside doubt, fear and hurt. We would not be here today if we'd thought friendship was unrealistic, if we had put it in the too hard basket or thought we were powerless. None of us can manufacture the wondrous miracle of friendship, but there is much that we can do to create the possibility, the probability of lives rich in relationship. It's never too early or too late to make relationships a priority. And like any investment strategy, it may be many years before you see the results of your efforts, but that's no reason not to begin. In the early years, the path was clear and straightforward because I had met those other parent advocates who'd reassured me that we could resist the special and choose the ordinary path. We had a vision that Sean would have the same life opportunities as his older sister, that he would be known and valued, connected within a web of relationships in his local community, and that he would live a life of purpose and contribution. We faced some barriers in the preschool years, the predictable advice of a special school placement from a guidance officer, and a later suggestion that he could attend just 1 hour a week in preschool. But we knew that those offers were not going to get us where Sean needed to be. Our vision grew stronger and bolder because we saw that people actually enjoyed Sean, as we did, and saw him as more alike than different. I did know even then that we would need to do more to give Sean the same opportunities for friendship. We had to be visible and known. Luckily, the known was easy because Sean met most of our neighbours when he visited them without warning or our knowledge, sometimes fully clothed, but frequently not. So this is what the ordinary path looked like. Ordinary places: playgroup, childcare, toddler gym, library sessions, swimming classes, regular Kindian school, circus, Auskick, soccer. It meant hanging out in the parks and museums, inviting friends over and making sure Sean's life looked as typical as possible. Remember, because this wasn't a fairy tale, there were occasional mean or insensitive comments, sort of questions about where Sean would go next, or times when I felt he was more of a novelty than seen as a true friend. Return invites weren't always as forthcoming, as for my daughter or as I had hoped. But we were intentional about strengthening connections outside school by being involved in age-appropriate community activities. Sean's status rose with his regular swim club involvement, with soccer trophies and certificates, and sharing exciting holiday snaps. On weekends, he came across his friends in ordinary, valued places. He could have spent after school and weekends at therapy or special activities, but what a lost opportunity to be known within his local community. During primary school, our other strategies were about maintaining valued roles at school, ensuring Sean was a full member of the class and school community, and avoiding the slide to being separated from his peers. So we thought about roles within the classroom, about what he was doing in the playground to connect with other children. He was in after-school care, and we paid attention to how he was supported there, how he participated in sports carnivals, camps, school concerts, assemblies, and liturgies. Taking the ordinary path also meant looking out for the kids who clicked with Sean. And still to this day, I'd have to say that's one of the things that I really pay attention to. Who is open to the gifts that Sean will bring? And once we know that, how can we grab onto the possibility of that relationship deepening? Sean really connects with people who like a bit of silly joy, often other high energy extroverts. But sometimes the connections are unlikely. A couple stand out of friends of Sean's who are very quietly spoken. Reza, who's there in white, who's a very gentle Hazara refugee that he works alongside, and another workmate, Hiroko. And that's a reminder to keep paying attention rather than limiting my son, for that is the magic of friendship. In those early years, though life was super busy and I could list a lot of excuses, my PhD studies, taxi duty for Millie, a baby, the work juggle, I prioritised play dates because I knew in my heart they were a powerful and ordinary way to cement a friendship. Sometimes the play dates were great and sometimes they were torture. Sean couldn't talk much, and I say with great love that he demonstrated the attention span of a gnat. He would abandon his friends and turn on the TV or just disappear. So I had to think and be really quite deliberate about the activities, the number of kids to invite, and have lots of backup plans. Because the life of boys was a mystery, I researched cool toys and games, and I used 2 hours of respite funding to employ some vibrant young support workers who were not emotionally over-involved as I was, and could be an extra pair of eyes, ears and hands to make sure it went well. Sean wouldn't pester me for play dates, but I tried to keep up the frequency to be as similar to his very social older sister. And then in later primary school, we moved to kind of Friday afternoon park catch-ups or kind of weekend movies. We also used paid support at times when Sean progressed through circus, soccer and taekwondo. As with the play dates, while the paid support was not essential, I did more because it was there. It was helpful to have the support at soccer because it was basically not a good look for me to be chasing him, chastising him really, around the soccer field. And I could get to have a beer with the other parents, and he was still engaging and learning the rules. As his friends mentioned, we were big on parties. The party strategy was nothing unique, but we were inclusive. I loved the pirate party, the photo there, though I wish people would have reminded me that pirates come with swords. We held a really fun twilight pool disco party because it was the first kind of late party that kids had been to, and they had glow sticks and the special effect disco lights. I think we wound up at 7:30, but it was kind of late enough for that to be special. And we just kind of, invented lots of reasons to have parties, including, you know, a thank you party to the teacher and teacher aide at the end of grade 7. A party which I agonised most over was a sleepover party for Sean's 12th birthday. At that time he wasn't super close to any of the boys and I wasn't confident they would come. I tried to buy Sean off, but he was pretty stubborn about it. So had no choice but to feel the fear and do it anyway. I spoke to a few of the parents and felt reassured that boys would come, and some boys would come. And I told myself that rejection is painful, but you can't die from it. In the end, almost all the boys came and Sean's happiness was palpable. When Sean was in grade 12, we hosted 2 18th birthday parties. That was a very dangerous precedent for my party boy. One was for family and friends and one was for school friends. Both took place in violent storms but were great successes. At the 18th, I was really conscious of mixing primary school friends and high school friends, and lots of those kids were still 16, so we weren't having alcohol as the mixer. So we hired a DJ and a photo booth, which gave the kids something to interact with and was again very successful. Hosting parties was highly effective in holding on to those primary school friends because we had parties at the Easter after their first term of being at high school, and kind of pretty much annually after that for his birthday. And we had a captive audience, party guests, and I seized the opportunities to tee up plans, make sure we had kids' phone numbers or that they were on Sean's Facebook list. I guess I tried to project enthusiasm without neediness. And I think that's important. My friendships with parents were another foundation in keeping those friendships going. Our last party at home was just last November, when Sean's swimming coach of 16 years retired, and we hosted a farewell party for him. And it was a great gathering of a lot of families who had been great allies to Sean in the past that we risked losing connection with. Now, I do need to say that the purpose of the parties wasn't so cynical. We like parties. I really enjoy the creative process of thinking of how to plan a party, and Sean loves parties. So it really wasn't a hardship. It was about being the community that we wanted to see for Sean, and that strategy really did work well for us. Looking back at primary school, I did not always get it right. Sometimes I ignored the offers of friendship or was too tentative about reaching out. When Sean realised I wasn't initiating as much, he took over, but instead of supporting him well, I sometimes brushed it off with "Oh, but don't worry, you're probably really busy," rather than backing him up. I got much better at saying yes and at closing the deal, setting a time and date, rather than settling for "we must catch up soon." The leap to high school was a long and sorry tale. The short version is that our applications were rejected at 3 schools, and we said no to the school that proudly showed us their restraint room. Running out of options, we started at a school a long way from home with a unit, not our ideal. Sean was there for 6 months. Over that time, he did mention a few names, but the one that I stood out was that I knew that he was fond of a boy called Jake. When we got an offer at a different school that had originally refused us, we left suddenly to minimise the backlash from the unit staff, which was happening. On the last day, I helped Sean to write a card to Jake, thanking him for his friendship and giving our number. I really had no expectations, but Jake phoned that same afternoon. Jake lived 40 minutes from our home, but we organised regular catch-ups over the high school years, sleepovers, mini-golf, swimming, movies, etc. Sean and Jake are still friends. They talk on the phone and Facebook, they catch up for an occasional beer, they went to each other's 21st. So those small tokens of friendship, making explicit the desire to remain a friend, and the acts of reciprocity should not be underestimated. It would have been easy to just move on, but friends are too precious to let go of prematurely. Sean's new school was a Catholic boys' school of over 1,400 students, a few minutes' walk from home, with a small core of 4 boys from primary school. Our first days were amazing due to an exceptional learning enrichment coordinator. Though we'd missed the early bonding of high school orientation, we finally had proximity on our side. It felt like our community. And Sean loved the all-boy environment. Which was a bit of a revelation. He was not daunted by the size as I was. He had some great teachers and relished the rituals of school. Assemblies, school sports days, school dances, walkathon, and his favourite, the school camp. For me, knowing only 4 boys out of 250 was not a great basis for figuring out how to support Sean in his friendships. And I did that thing of trying to talk to the teachers about who he connected with. And by the end of grade 8, I only had one name, Matt, who's the boy in the white kind of tie in one of those photos. But this teacher was absolutely spot on. And again, Matt is still a great friend all of those years later. A few parents did approach me to say their children were pleased to meet Sean, and whenever that happened, I wrote down that name so I wouldn't forget. Still, the social life of boys perplexed me a great deal. And I was completely confused when Sean gave me names about which Tom, which Jack, which Braden, Brandon or Brendan he was talking about in a class of 250. Sadly, the wonderful staff member left, and during much of year 9 and 10, Sean struggled socially. He was teased and set up, and he desperately tried to engage by doing silly, annoying things like taking boys' hats and throwing them down a gap between buildings. As many schools do, they ignored the desperate need to belong and characterised Sean as a burden, a problem, and a menace. We were told he could not attend camp, which he looked forward to all year, and then repeatedly told that our son needed a specialised protective environment meant for children like him. We were faced with a campaign to demoralise us enough to leave, including being billed for his support costs and then directly threatened with ever more exclusions until we would give up and leave. The head of pastoral care at one of these meetings of 9 professionals confidently declared that Sean has not a single friend at the school, as apparent proof of his intrinsic incapacity for friendship, and not their failure to live up to their Christian values. Despite my genetic stubbornness, my clear vision and faith in Sean, niggling doubts and heightened alert rose with every new incident. Earlier, I had approached some on-site teachers about helping to set up a support circle for Sean. I wish I had the courage, and they were initially enthusiastic, but it was quashed by the hierarchy. I wished I'd had the courage to do more, but it felt like all our energies were taken up clinging on to his enrolment. So I used my time as a tuck shop to be a better detective, to get to know boys in his year level and chat casually about who Sean liked. I invited his whole homeroom to a Halloween party, confident that if none came, at least his primary school friends would. With persistence, some teachers helped me to understand Sean's connection in different friendship groups. We also worked hard to build up valued roles. He became the top fundraiser of his cycling team, and he did the Gold Coast to Brisbane cycling ride with his dad on a tandem bike. And we also did a lot of relationship repair when Sean hurt a child with a thrown padlock, hid phones, or tore up assignments. I did know that there were some fine, loyal young men in his class, and I guess he also had a safety net with his primary school friends, his friends at youth group, and he was active in jiu-jitsu and swimming, but still they were tough times. While a number of strategies were utilised to get back on track, there was a big turnaround in grade 11 just through the boys' increasing maturity and Sean's own increasing maturity. But probably the best thing was that I was successful in advocating for his inclusion in the rugby program, which was kind of like the biggest thing at the school. He travelled by school train to the school playing fields, and he was attached to a team as the supporter and water carrier. He didn't play the games, but he did participate fully in the training. He really found his tribe in the rugby boys, so much so that in the year that he left school, the boys, when they were playing for club, contacted Sean and asked him to also be in that supporting role with them. The last 18 months were worth all of the trauma of the previous years. The events of year 12, leadership camp, senior induction, the formal, were a fantastic match for my party boy. So many events and so much recognition from his peers for being a camp legend, for example, and eating the most sausages, to more official awards from his homeroom teachers. Before we knew it, it was his deeply moving graduation. I was extraordinarily proud of the maturity Sean displayed as he walked amongst his peers, kind of shaking their hand and congratulating them, really networking a bit like his mother. And then he embraced the closest of his friends in a big bear hug and was an enthusiastic participant in singing the school song and war cry in the pouring rain. He attended the post-graduation party and then he headed to Gold Coast for schoolies. We needed some different arrangements, so he stayed in a unit with his sister and her friends and then with a support worker. But he attended the beach parties and other events, and he hung out a lot with his friends in their units and in his, drinking beer. And he was 18 and legal where they weren't. When we left school, we Facebook messaged a number of the boys to say that Sean valued their friendship and we hoped that they would stay in touch. I asked if it wouldn't be too weird if I messaged them from time to time to help make those arrangements. And the wonderful responses back fed my courage. And almost all of those young men are still in Sean's life 4.5 years later. Facebook profile pics are also fantastic for working out the Brandons, the Brendans and the Bradens. It's a little bit stalkerish, but I do actually have a little black book full of their names, their phone numbers and their suburbs for the ease of making arrangements. A really critical piece of forging young adult friendships was taking some risk throughout high school, encouraging Sean to attend, for example, the post-formal, post-external assessment and post-graduation parties with 500 young people experimenting with alcohol, you know, the full security kind of thing. Now, no parent wants to be dropping their kid off to a party that doesn't even get started until midnight. But Sean had the right to an ordinary teenage life. It felt scary, so we needed our backup plans. Talking to some of his friends, hovering at a nearby Macca's, but being there was a clear message to his friends that he was going to be in the real world, not a disability world, and when their interest turned to pubs and nightclubs, it meant that they could also imagine him there. In that first year after high school, he used to go to a kind of a uni pub night at the RE in Brisbane. He'd line up with his ID with hundreds of other kind of just turned 18-year-olds. And it was so wonderful and so scary. But it was exciting, at least until he turned off his phone and refused to come out and I was in the car in my pyjamas at the pickup time. Last year was the year of 21st, so almost every weekend there were multiple social engagements and a couple of weekends we had 3 birthday parties to juggle. What a wonderful problem. An ordinary life does require us to figure things out though. One of the parties he was invited to was out camping at a dam. My husband thought that that combination of young men drinking water, motorised boats was a ridiculous idea, but I wore him down. I spoke to his friends and I booked a motel room 15 minutes away. I did have my doubts when I dropped Sean off at 1 p.m. and he was immediately handed a beer. I was not reassured when he told me he would be careful not to vomit in his tent. The next day I arrived to pick him up mid-morning and I got to play spy. Here was this young man who I was told did not have a single friend, being seamlessly included and supported. His Laurie's mates, his old boys, were helping him with sunscreen and when he was stuck in the mud trying to get out to the boat. But they weren't letting him they were telling him as well to put his own rubbish in the bin, which I really liked. I assume they helped him back to the tent at night, but he may not have been the only one who needed that sort of assistance. These boys are not saints or somehow deserving of a medal. As his friend Braden said when I asked if I could put these photos on Facebook, wasn't anything special, just looking out for my mate like I would any of them. Lucky to have Sean in our lives. And from the birthday boy Tom, who knew that it had been sort of something we'd had to figure out about Sean coming. I'm so glad Sean could come. I've often talked to my dad about Shawnee and the impact he's had on my personal attitude towards life. How honoured I am to have spent my high school years with such a wonderful guy. Sean on the lake tubing was the highlight of my 21st. Hearing him expressing his joy and seeing the happiness radiate through everyone around him is honestly the most humbling experience I've had to date. So have you heard the one about the gap getting wider? About people with disability needing to be with their own kind? About how people with disability don't even miss friends because they don't miss what they haven't had? All lies. Over and over again, Sean's school friends, workmates, youth group friends are able to articulate what they gained from having Sean around. They know the essence of Sean, his spirit, his fun, his determination, his joy. They say he's been the glue. The Laurie's mates even say that they said their school spirit was stronger in the year and they played rugby better, but that could have been the beer talking. The hard times do not have the last word. This is really important. Since Sean has left school, I've also seen more clearly the legacy of his earlier inclusion. We have been successful in building a web of relationships around him. In adult life, we continue to be mindful of how we can deepen relationships, ensuring Sean is more authentically in valued roles. Because Sean has some natural gifts of sociability and hospitality, these are a very good match for his workplaces at MDA and at the Convention Centre. He works across 4 different teams, in the uniform room with the sets team, with setting up chairs and tables at staging. At MDA, he contributes to the operations and corporate support teams with a mix of admin, office support and hospitality. So printing, shredding, catering and lots of kind of drink service at their functions. He shares lunches with his workmates, and I've seen the magic that happens when he carves up the dance floor at the work Christmas party. For Sean, the fact that these are big workplaces with lots of people is a real asset, and I know that that might be a nightmare for others. It is, though, important that he's also connected to smaller teams so he has a place to can find his place. MDA has an amazing number of social opportunities to spill out into after hours, staff retreats days, cultural festivals, a lantern parade, Christmas parties. So we need to be careful to make the most of those opportunities that Sean always has a role. So this, I guess, is the little bit of work that we do to make things go deeper. One of the other things we've done is 2 years ago, we invited his friend Kanishka. We got some kind of 2-for-1 deals, and we invited his friend Kanishka to come on a holiday with us to Bali, which was also extremely successful. Sorry, they're clicking back to Soccer Zorb and Christmas parties and staff retreat days there. So these are the Bali photos. And with his friend Matt, I guess Matt helps us to make sure that we know the details of some of the social events, and he's also the person who makes sure that Sean gets into an Uber after one of the social events. So it's really helpful to have those connecting people within the workplace. To go deeper, it's also at youth group we've found that one of the things that worked very well was for him to have a specific role of offering hospitality in our home. So it was important in youth group that Sean was known for his gifts and not the fact that he can nod off when the meetings go on too long. I wasn't always sure that the church folks were Sean's people. They didn't appreciate the same fart jokes, insults and boasts about beer that his schoolmates did. So it was a slow burn. And again, I think the steady investment over time really was what helped cement that, as well as the exceptional regularity and frequency. So there were weekly Sunday evening gatherings, fortnightly dinners for the young adults, leader meetings, socials like ice skating, hikes, bounce camps. So on average, Sean would be with those youth group people 2 or 3 times a week, which gives that chance for that slow burn to ignite. I guess the contrast could not be greater between how he was seen at school and how he is seen in adult life. So what helped build this life of relationships? I have always known that Sean has considerable gifts. He is funny and generous, charming, enthusiastic. He is great company. But we as his family needed to make sure that these gifts were shared with the world. We needed to avoid some pretty obvious mistakes, like allowing Sean to be separated from his peers or allowing adults to be a barrier to friendship. We needed to make sure we didn't place too much expectation on a few friends, but rather made sure that Sean was known in multiple friendship groups. We couldn't afford to become resentful of the effort or just let things slide. When we were faced with naysayers, our vision needed to be stronger. We needed to keep believing in Sean and his capacity for friendship, and we needed to build our courage to fight for him. To have high expectations is to risk disappointment. To expect welcome is to risk rejection. But whether it was hosting that sleepover, approaching a potential employer or enrolling in university, I needed to feel the fear and do it anyway. We learned to resist the seduction and empty calories of the special clubs and activities, to do the ordinary things that help people be known in their community. We learned to grow a thicker skin, to go where we were not immediately welcomed and persevere rather than retreating into something less risky. We learned to forgive and not be too precious. All kids, all human beings have their own stuff to work out. Sometimes feeling let down has nothing to do with disability or a lack of mutuality, and all to do with the fact that people are working out their own stuff. We learned to make relationships a priority and pay attention to the subtle and important ways to support Sean, to be a good and enduring friend. We learned to be a good ambassador and also how to support without intruding or holding things too tightly. We learned to be a detective about the typical valued roles, look and activities at every age and stage. It doesn't hurt to be a bit of a stalker, but get independent legal advice on that one. Mostly though, what we have learned through our experiments is that we must stubbornly insist on a life at the centre for the people we love and care about. Everyone has gifts to share. Our communities are better when everyone is here. We must take the time to truly imagine that, imagine more for every single person. My beautiful son deserves a big life, a life of adventure, a life where he knows to his core that he is loved and cherished. May that wonderful reality continue to be true for him and for all. Let the green grass grow.